overheard at the grocery store weeks before. A young man and his mother were checking out ahead of me. He was examining a magazine with a headline highlighting the dangers of global warming and enticing the reader to look within to find out what they could do to help. As he put the magazine back, he quipped to his mother, "We won't even be around in the next 50 years. Why does this matter?" I remembered feeling the sting of hopelessness and an educator's urge to jump into the conversation and encourage him to analyze what he had just said. As I stood in that checkout line, the feeling of his despair blanketed me. As I watched the insurrection unfold on January 6th, I wondered what he and all the students like him showing up to their Zoom and in-person classrooms felt as they witnessed this moment in history. If January 6th, 2021, shined an undeniable spotlight on the cracks and fissures in our entire society, I wondered what role education could play in mending those gaps. While the most acute pressure from the education system's structural instability can be felt at the classroom level, we needed a framework to help educators address just how deeply and widely these injustices had spread. When I first became a public school teacher in 1996, I learned pretty early on that those in positions of power, both within and outside the school system, were making decisions that, at best, affected their quarterly assessments and, at worst, affected the minute-to-minute, day-to-day actions and planning of educators in school buildings. Even when I held positions at the district level later in my career, my skills were leveraged into what was deemed pertinent for the newest endeavor, not into addressing the systemic inequities I'd witnessed for years and at every level. It was at the system level, sitting in meetings where leaders were making decisions regarding materials, products, programs, and hiring practices that would play a role in either supporting our students' careers and college trajectories or hindering them, where I finally began to see the machine behind the cloak of the public school system. I quickly understood that the decisions being made were not always grounded in the research and evaluation cycle. Instead, decisions were birthed from political views, relationships, and, of course, funding. I was disappointed to realize how little system leaders utilized the research and development that were necessary to eradicate harmful conditions for students who experience the greatest disenfranchisement through food, housing, and economic insecurities. Justice is found in the details of teaching and learning was born out of those experiences and the experiences of the many educators at Unbound Ed, who wanted to take a different approach to transforming education for Black, Brown, and Indigenous children. Years ago at Unbound Ed, a national nonprofit I've led since 2019, after 23 years as an educator, we began a journey to address how those fissures showed up in the work of education. In frank conversations, we released our own shame about complicity in upholding the system as it is, and we read the research about how to combat the systemic inequities that had both benefited and harmed us. Through this process, we began to see a path forward. At the center of that path is an understanding that moments like January 6, 2021, happen when we refuse to fully wrestle with our sordid past as a nation as it relates to racism and to our failed systems. Most importantly, we have not as a nation faced the ways these failures influence our thinking and understanding of the world around us. We live in a time in our society in which information cycles at a pace few people could have anticipated decades ago. Partly because it's so hard to sift through all of that information, I believe we have retrained ourselves to trust the word that is shuffled among us, online and in conversation, rather than the word that lives on paper as a result of review and verification. Even as more information streams into our lives, most people will leave high school having learned to read only moderately. Moderate readers may at times find themselves relying more on the word that was passed to them rather than on what they